Welcome to EdTech Speaks, a podcast bringing guests together to share their expertise and advice on navigating business and education in a technology-driven world. From entrepreneurs to vendors, higher education to corporate leaders, we'll uncover their perspective regarding the latest trends and technologies impacting your career or business. Our podcast is made possible by Downing EdTech Consulting, where people and technology connect. Hosted by Cher Downing, an experienced executive spanning a higher education and corporate career with specific focus on the EdTech industry. Dr. Downing is also an international and national presenter, author, and regular media contributor. Now here is your host, EdTech strategist, Dr. Cher Downing.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to EdTech Speaks, a podcast where we bring guests to share their expertise and advice on navigating business and education in a technology-driven world. Our goal is to provide you with options for products, services, and knowledge that can help benefit you or your business. I'm Cher Downing, your host, and I want to introduce today's guest, Ho Yin Cheung, who is the founder and the brain trust, really, behind the product Remo, the virtual events platform. Welcome.
Thank you, Cher. I'm super excited to be on the podcast today.
And I'm excited for a couple of reasons. One, listeners, you need to know that I have personally experienced this product in a consumer position and loved it. Just really enjoyed using it. And I know it's just the cusp of things to come with it. And two, I have to thank Hoyin because it's midnight in Hong Kong, which is where he's at. And he has stayed up to talk with me. So this is really great. So we're going to start out, with the usual. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how this came to be.
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from the United States, and I went back and forth between Hong Kong and in the US during my education and during my time working. And then when I went back to Hong Kong, I was already doing like a lot of consulting. So I was working in a very remote work type of environment already. And through that, I kind of started off different ventures by just simply outsourcing to different countries to do work. And when I first started doing that, it was more of like as a way to just try to get things done. There wasn't much talent to do what I needed to do in Hong Kong. And so I had to go out and find it.
Sure.
Eventually over time, was able to, get a few things going. And one of the things that I found myself doing was creating a team that was virtual, that was remote. And that's when I kind of started doing a lot of research, starting to kind of get into remote work, virtual events. How do you, create experiences for people that really just drive authentic conversations that build meaningful relationships? And so I can dive deeper into the journey. It's a bit of a good story. I can probably dive deeper into the actual story, but at a high level, that's kind of how I started. And
what years kind of was that happening in?
Around 2013 to 2020.
Okay. So, and my reason for asking that is because you were thinking of this ahead of time. And while we did have some remote situations globally, they were limited. And lo and behold, 2019 came and 2020 came and the pandemic hit. And suddenly you were in a space of comfort and knowledge and expertise at a time when many, many people were just trying to figure this all out, how to make this work, how to get their companies going. So talk a little bit about how that moved into that realm and that space.
Yeah. So we originally created a virtual office platform, actually. So the original core problem that I was trying to solve was when you're working remotely, as we all now know, it is really difficult to keep culture and relationships when you're working with people online, especially with new people that you've never worked with in person before. That's especially hard. So I created a virtual office as a way to create this sort of water cooler, hallway conversation, ability to just very easily pop into a room and then just talk to someone.
Sure.
And then be able to sort of like see and feel someone's presence and try to like mimic those type of human things that you would typically see at the office. So I started this in 2018 and nobody really bought this product in 2018 because remote work was such a remote concept,
Yep.
literally. And then before around 2019, when I was trying to figure out, okay, like not many people really care about remote. Okay, so what can I do? And I found that my goal, which is building authentic conversations that drive meaningful relationships, that goal actually could be more easily accomplished by creating virtual events. In fact, virtual events is more of like the supercharged version of that of a virtual office, because in a virtual office, you mostly spend most of your time working, not necessarily talking to people. And so we found that was actually much more effective to do it through virtual events. So when we started, I fully pivoted into virtual events, I would say the middle of 2019. And by 2020, we were one of the virtual events platforms that was being talked about and people were considering us and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, it was pretty crazy in terms of the timing and how we were able to just be able to get, it's a lot of timing, I would say.
I would agree with that. And listeners, I think there's some key lessons to be learned here, short-term and long-term. One is you continually talk about solving a problem. You had a vision and a goal of what you wanted to do. And you talk about keeping that goal at the forefront and really working towards that when you didn't necessarily have an audience for it. And then suddenly you did have an audience for it, but that goal didn't change. You pivoted the focus, but you're still feeding that goal and meeting that need. And I think, for our listeners, that especially for those that are wanting to be an entrepreneur, that is just key, that you maintain that loyalty to that goal and that problem that you're trying to solve. But you have to also be nimble enough to look around and say, hey, let's take advantage of what's currently going on in the world. That's
absolutely right. Absolutely right.
And so from my perspective, I went to a virtual event in Remo. And, the first thing I get told is there are multiple levels in this building. And when you walk in, you're going to see places you can sit. There's going to be gathering spots. You can go up to this lecture if you want, or you can go, have coffee with someone. And I'm reading this description and I'm thinking, really? Because we're all used to a very two-dimensional kind of platform. We see each other, we may see multiples of each other, but we don't really get to chitty chat. We don't really get to move around. I can't really say to someone, hey, let's you and I just have a conversation offline, because literally we have to go offline.
Right.
When you're in the Remo space, it's like, hey, let's go sit at this table. And so what I found in this virtual event was I could table hop. I could meet new and interesting people who all had similar likes to me because they were attending the same event. I could have someone say to me, you might want to go over to table 7 because there's someone there that does something similar to you. It, might be a great connection. I could even just table hop to sit and listen to people chat and just hear the conversation. And then when I was tired of that conversation, I could step away and go to a different table. I could wander this virtual building, which was really quite fun. It really does make you feel like you're physically moving around, you're seeing different things. And this was a first edition, I believe, of the floor plan when we were in it. And then screens on the wall, just like at a conference center, that are telling you, hey, 5 minutes until the next drawing. And, this is going to start over here. And I found I became immersed in the process. And I looked forward to going back as opposed to, I'm going to log in and I'm going to listen, but I'll probably do something else at my desk because I'm still sitting in the same space doing the same old thing. So I think you've hit your big goal. I think you really have. You made meaningful relationships. You made it feel like I was there. I was among other people and people from all over the world, not just people in the US. So my customer experience was amazing. And I've been to, I think, 2 other events since then on the platform. But talk to us a little bit about coming up with that floor plan idea and kind of where that's going, because that really is just phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's you described it really, really well too. I couldn't have described it any better. Yeah. So what I was focused on was more like, how do people have conversations? And when you think about how people have conversations, it's usually more intimate. It's usually a lot of conversations in parallel. Right now, the way how we think about meetings or conversations, it's more of like one person is speaking at the same time. And so you need to have multiple tables, and those table sizes need to be anywhere between like 4 and 6. You can't really have a great conversation more than 6 or, with 7 or 8 people. And so that was really important. And what we found was that the movement really allowed people to really create a custom experience for themselves. Like by moving, you become more engaged and active because you now have control. Mm-hmm. When you have control, you're automatically more engaged, right? Because you're in the driver's seat. And so the engagement then from our events, we get like 3.2x way more engagement than any of in your standard event, because people get to customize who they want to talk to, where they want to go. And, we haven't talked, people do kind of compare us to like metaverse type style. And I think for us, like metaverse is interesting, it's great, but it's not, I called us like metaverse light, as in like, it's easy to use. You don't need to know blockchain. You don't need to know any of that stuff. You just double click on a table. So it's a very simplified version of what the metaverse is. It's not it's not as complex as a game. And so that's where we kind of started off with. And people have been very resonated about that concept. And the fact that you get to move allows you to be able to choose who you want to talk to. And then in terms of like the future, like we have a lot, like, for example, we're releasing new features that allow you to, for example, something simple like lock tables, for example. So you can kind of like have private conversations. You can also like integrate and talk to different people, get matched, focus more on this the conversation and the relationship part. How do we really double down on that and make it even more easier and tracked in terms of how effective that is?
Right.
And so we're focusing a lot on that aspect of the technology.
That's fascinating, because for years I've worked with conference groups and actually started my career way back when in working with conferencing. And one of the things that we always struggle with is, how much did people actually get out of our event? Even in a physical presence, we can look in the ballroom. We know you're sitting there. We know you're moving from room to room. And we always end with a survey at the end. Did you enjoy the conference? What was your favorite part? And it really doesn't tell us, did they really get an immersive experience with it? It just gives us that surface data of, I showed up and I thought the catering was great. It really doesn't tell us about people. It doesn't tell us about what they want to do, what they want to learn, who they gathered with. And it's funny because I was at a conference last week, virtual, and in the messaging area is always, there's going to be a happy hour here. And, they're going to meet there and all. And one person posted and said, I want to start a group of people who truly want to connect and have long-term relationships. She said, I am tired of shifting around, sharing business cards, meeting you at the table for lunch, and then never talking to you again. She said, so only people that are serious about having a relationship, please meet with us at this time. And we're going to form a group and we're going to connect and stay connected. And I thought that was interesting, because I thought, I wonder, it immediately filled. I mean, a lot of people were really excited about it. And I thought, I wonder how many people also who don't see that message, but feel that same way, that they went to the conference for 5 days and they learned a little something, they got a nugget or two, but they really don't have that connection piece. And they really feel like, gosh, it would have been nice to know somebody or have a more meaningful conversation. So I think you're spot on with that, because I think that's especially after being remote working for 2 years and not being able to go anywhere and do anything, I think people are really feeling a sense of disconnection among just our human race, and they want that connectivity.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like that connection is really crucial, especially now with hybrid work, right? Like with hybrid work, I think that connection has allowed a lot of us, not to be as close to potentially our coworkers because of hybrid, because you're not seeing them that often. It might be a good thing. Your life isn't revolved around work and colleagues as much. Maybe it's a better in terms of work-life balance, maybe. But at the same time though, you do meet a lot of people through work and through just in general. And so yeah, you're right that there's a lack. I think there's a lack of that. And I think what I view is that we are trying to help that and trying to help us stay connected. Because I think, after everyone goes to physical events and all that kind of stuff and has gone out and revenge travel and revenge shopping, like all of that is finished, they're going to realize like maybe they don't want to travel so much, or maybe they want to regulate and have a balance of that. And so how are you going to balance that? And I think there's a lot of options, and I think we're so far away from this equilibrium. I don't think we're really at the equilibrium yet.
No, I'd agree. And so who's your customer right now in terms of using your platform? And is that your true customer? Is that, do you want to broaden that? Just, kind of where does that start and where is it going?
Yeah. So we still have higher ed that actually use us right now. So surprisingly. And, but the use cases have changed, the use cases that remain have changed. So that's very telling and very helpful. We still have corporates that also use us as well from various industries. So I would say like what has changed is how, like what I would say is that the industries and the organizations where their audience is relatively distributed, that is kind of left over and really allowed us to really narrow down on those types of customers. And so I think that's like the biggest thing. Like there's a bunch of customers that we know that are going back to face, like they don't really, need Remo, and because of that. And so we realized that there's a bunch of customers that are more of like pandemic, reactors. Like they're just reacting to the pandemic. And those are the customers where they're clearly like just not the right fit for like a long-term customer, which is fine, which is totally okay. And so we're just slowly trying to like eliminate and focus on the ones that we see as a high potential for long-term.
Sure. Well, and it's interesting because yes, you see that in a lot of things where people are just like, oh, we're back, it's fine. And then this morning they announced that numbers are creeping up in Manhattan. Another COVID potential surge. Not really sure that it can be a surge, but at the same time, they're saying we could have a surge for a different reason, which is when the free testing goes away and when the free vaccines go away.
Right.
We could have a surge as a result of just people, those last remaining people aren't going to do anything. So in the event the numbers start going up and we start masking again and all, the people that are being reactive, were reactive the first time around, are now being reactive a second time around. I suspect some of them will come back to you the third time around and then realize it needs to be more of a hybrid situation. We can't be all or nothing. Right. I think that'll definitely be interesting. So how do people set up with your product? Like what's the process through that?
So to set up, you can go to our website and you can try, we have a free trial that you can sign up for. You can contact us, and we can also like offer give you a demo. You can also attend one of our group demos, so you get to experience the product yourself, and that's like the best way is to experience the product yourself. You move around and you can ask questions, and that's actually the best way to experience it as a relatively larger group, and then just kind of trying out the product yourself and seeing how it works.
And for those that are listening, I definitely recommend ideally the group demo, because you've got other people there and you really get a feel for what it's going to be like. If you can't squeeze that one in, at least do the demo, because you will be just fascinated by this. And I think, we talk about doing it for the workplace and we talk about doing it for events, but there's that gray space in between where maybe because you have global offices, an event is internal. So it's not really work and it's not really a, full-blown conference, but it is something that you're doing that's specific to an internal audience. I know in higher ed, the big thing is between budgets and pandemic and insurance, higher ed went back to campus, but it wouldn't allow a lot of employees to travel. And so people still need hybrid conferences. And I suspect going forward, we're going to continue to need hybrid conferences because money is difficult. People now have a lot of residual healthcare issues as a result of this whole pandemic. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people aren't going to want to travel anymore. They don't want to be, the airlines last week said, hey, we're mask free. And everybody went, not really excited about that, and you saw pictures where a lot of people still had their masks on. So kind of what's your vision for where we go now in a hybrid situation?
That's a really great question. I think there's one thing that's really the only consistent thing about the pandemic is that you cannot really predict what's going to happen. And I try not to predict too much, but what I would say is that hybrid events is complicated, is what I've heard and what I've seen myself. I think people with a lot of budget can do hybrid events. I think universities and corporates are all trying to gear up for hybrid events or hybrid meetings and stuff like that. I think over time that might be better once everyone's got all the technology.
Yes.
But if you're talking about true hybrid, I think there's a lot of problems with hybrid events that have not been resolved. There's a lot of technology, like video camera technology and all this stuff that you need that if you've got the budget, yeah, for sure that can be done. But if you don't, I see a lot of people just doing physical events and just not really caring about the hybrid part or caring about the physical part. People want to do hybrid, but just paying for the physical price.
Right.
They don't want to pay extra for the hybrid, but that's what you need. You need another team to kind of help manage that. So I'm not sure where hybrid is going to go. I think hybrid still needs a little bit more development from startups to really truly come up with a solution that can work, at least from a hybrid event side and also from a hybrid meeting side as well. I think there's some space to grow from a technology standpoint that could allow that to be a little bit more effective and better.
And I think, you're absolutely right. And there's other growth for hybrid as well. We still oftentimes when we have speakers, when we have presenters, they come in and they show a PowerPoint. And so it's very, one-dimensional, sitting in a ballroom, watching them click through slides and talk to you. But now we're seeing that with the added layer of hybrid. So now you've got people who are virtually in, who are struggling to see the screen because maybe there's not a setup to see the screen on your own computer. And then we're also seeing where the speaker hasn't been trained. So the speaker's not really paying attention to the hybrid audience. The speaker says, does anyone have questions? And then only takes the questions that are in the audience in front of them and not the ones that are in the chat box. And if the conference people aren't managing the chat box for them, it's difficult. I was on one the other day that was a hybrid and the chat box was blowing up with comments and questions, really good comments that were not being fed into the room. So, the room wouldn't give comments back. Like she'd ask an open-ended question and say, well, what do you all think about this? And there'd just be dead space. And no one was jumping in and saying, hey, here's a great comment here. Or somebody wanted to know, do you think this could be the future? There was just nothing. And so it was unfortunate because you lost that rich dynamic that is, again, going back to part of what you're trying to capture is that rich dynamic of, authentic relationships and having those conversations. And so it's going to be difficult. I think you're right. I think hybrid, to do it really well, is going to require teaching and learning to look differently at it. It's going to look at idea presentation different. It's going to look at the technology dynamics, even something as simple as where you're hosting it. Are you in a room that just isn't right for having a virtual audience broadcast in with it? So the flip side of it is it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time for entrepreneurs. It's an exciting time for startups. It's exciting for people to be able to use products like yours and really start to see the future, what it could be. Going through Remo and just having that experience of being at a conference that was virtual, and then thinking back to that when I was at this virtual conference last week, such a difference, because it wasn't flat learning. It wasn't flat dimensional in terms of participation and seeing. I was immersed in Remo.
Yeah.
So, I think your future is bright, taking that forward and really helping people understand a better way to do these things.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. We're definitely trying. And I think like I do think that there is some space for hybrid. It's just, I think it's still needing more time. And it also depends on what people want too. I think also people right now, there's some shifts that are happening with what people actually want from an audience standpoint and also from a host standpoint. So I think there's just still a lot of shifting around that needs to kind of play out. But I think, and thank you. I think at Remo, building those relationships, making it as human as possible is something that we always try to do. And those relationships, we think are important in this world where it is hard to kind of figure out what's real and what's not, what's authentic, what is
right.
Because it's very difficult. There's a lot of noise. And for me personally, I like to go back to basics. I want to talk to someone.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to talk to someone. I don't want to go through social media or, whatever. I feel like nothing beats me just talking to another person. Nothing beats that. And as long as you can create those conversations happen and make them happen, humans just become natural in doing what they do best. And that's just to socialize and talk to people and stuff. And that I think that's really the magic. You don't really have to do too much other than just put people in a room, and a nice looking room at that.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. And I think for a long time, we thought technology was going to replace that interaction. And what we've now come to realize is technology is there to enhance the interaction, but it really doesn't replace it. You can't say in an email what you can say face to face. And we all know this, because how many times do you get an email that just says, do you have a minute? Let's hop on a call, or let's hop on video, because it'll take me too long to explain this, and type it all out. And then you're just going to have questions, and we're going to be going back and forth all day. So I think we're also at a point where we're realizing this, and the pandemic, again, definitely forced it, because we did a lot of communication via technology, not just at work, but with our families and with our elders. And we started to realize, there's some things missing here. It's okay for now, but it's not something I want to do long term. So I think you've got the right idea, and definitely the focus for where things are going. So the last question for you is, what else do you want people to know about Remo?
I think definitely that Remo is a fantastic engagement tool. Engagement on Remo is 3.2x better than a Zoom call. And so we're very, very good at engaging people in such a way that the learning rate is much better. The ability for people to remember things is much higher. There's a lot more peer-to-peer, because of one of the reasons, because there's a lot more peer-to-peer learning. It's not just a one-way learning, and it brings more life to the event itself. And that's why you host events. And I think that's something that's really, really important. And we're able to accomplish and replicate your real life event and make it as real as anyone has ever made it. And so if you're looking to make an event really truly engaging, Remo is the platform for you.
I couldn't agree more. Hoyin, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Listeners, as I said before, I really hope that you go out and participate in one of the demos, but I'm pushing you and voting for the group demo because I want you to experience how really cool this is. We will be sharing where you listen to podcast areas, website, and YouTube information as well, because they've got some great links out there for you to look at. We really think Remo is a product that you want to consider with some things that you're working on. So thank you again for joining us. Thanks to all our listeners. Remember, we're available on Spotify, Audible, Apple, iHeartRadio, Google, Acast, Stitcher. And as always, thank you and keep learning.
Thank you for listening to EdTech Speaks with EdTech strategist Cher Downing. To learn more about the services Downing EdTech and its staff can provide you, find us at www.downingedtech.com. If you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to share it. We'd also like to hear from you regarding any suggestions for topics or guests and the value you received from our show. Check back for new podcasts with featured guests at www.downingedtech.com/podcast.